So this is another health-oriented video. So this is something I hear a lot, and this is a really silly misconception when it comes to health. So obviously I go to the gym a lot, and so I do talk to people who, lift weights, as much as I do. And obviously there's a lot of men who go and I talk to them and they lift a lot heavier than I do. I don't dispute that. They've been going for years and, they're guys, there's all these other differences between the female and the male body. So I don't dispute that. But what I do find funny, the amount of males in particular, but a lot of people think like this, females too, that you'll be stronger by consuming animal protein. Like, people think this is the superior protein. And like I said, one of the misconceptions is that it's a perfect protein. I mean, it's kind of a weird thing to say. The protein was eaten by the animal, and their body converted it and used it. So from a conversion point of view, it's already been converted. It's been processed by the animal's body. That doesn't make it perfect. And it doesn't have any of the variables that human beings need as far as protein goes. So there's this idea that if you aren't eating meat, you're going to be weaker. Look, this misconception started in, it was sort of an early 19, when sort of marketing started to sort of really hit. So I think like the 1920s, 1940s. It was around that time when farming went into far more of an industrial. It started to, anyways, more the 40s, I would say, creeping into the 50s. This is when this kind of started to change, and they started to make consuming animal products more of a like assembly line thing rather than, through people's community farmers and things like this. It became more of like a conveyor belt situation. And so it became a more money-making based scheme. So one of the things that they did was they marketed to men in particular that consuming meat makes you more manly, makes you stronger. And that has been a lie that's been perpetuated to sell a product since back then. And it's still believed now strongly. When the reality is, eating meat actually messes with your testosterone levels. It reduces it. So just like most of these things, the reverse is true. So that's one of the things I hear a lot, which is kind of silly. And I think there's these funny ideas that you're going to be weaker if you're not consuming meat. Long as you're consuming the building blocks that form like amino acid work in the body, digestion, most importantly are antioxidants and nutrients, which of course come from plants. You can't really even get those. I know people think you can, but you can't, not really. So you can't get antioxidants from animal products at all. Not at all. They don't exist. You can get a converted down animal protein, but it's not even where protein really comes from. So you don't really repair your muscles very well after gym or workouts in general. It causes more damage than good. So there's no way it could make you stronger. I think it's just the lack of knowing, the lack of marketing, the lack of research on a mainstream level. And, the reality that you have to look at for this is that the animal product companies don't want people knowing this. They want you to keep consuming their product. It's exactly the same as like the cigarette companies, alcohol companies. I know that there's not as much, depends on the country, but there's not as much marketing for these things anymore. But it used to be, right? It used to be that they were marketed heavily. Now it's a lot of places, like I said, it's illegal to do so. But it's still But if you look at it like cigarettes, for instance, ever since there hasn't been as much marketing, they've dropped off. People have sort of moved more towards vapes, which of course obviously isn't good, but again, it depends. It depends. It's obviously not good for your lungs, but if it doesn't have nicotine in it, it's not as bad as cigarettes, I suppose. It's neither here nor there. I suppose it's still damage to the lungs. Anyway, I digress. But that's the situation. Whatever it is that you're marketed to believe doesn't necessarily mean that it's true, doesn't mean it's good information, it's just what you've been conditioned to believe. One of the other things I wanted to mention, I've heard a lot of people say things like, oh, I went on like a carnivore diet and I healed all of my autoimmune diseases and all this stuff. Look, the situation's this. If you're cutting out all of the processed junk food, right? So if before you went on a carnivore diet or like a paleo diet or whatever, you were eating a lot of like cookies and crisps and heavily processed junk food, maybe you were also drinking more alcohol, or you got to put all the factors into place here. If you're doing the like full proper carnivorous or keto based diet, your body goes into a state of ketosis. That's why they call it keto. And for a short-term period, you can help, some of these things, because again, you've cut out the junk food. So your body is eating, it's absorbing and using things that are, again, it depends on how you look at it, but they're not as bad, right? In some ways they're worse, but from a short-term perspective, it can appear that way. It can appear that it's better. But you can't live long-term on eating sticks of butter and big chunks of meat and no vegetables. Like, I'm sorry, you're not going to be doing too well. Or fruit, because you're not getting antioxidants. So your body can't repair itself. So the situation you have to look at is this, that if you cut out animal products, you will live. Not only live, you'll thrive. Like, you will do better, because that's where all the nutrients are. If you cut out vegetables and fruit and you're only eating meat, long term, they've already concluded studies-wise that people don't do well on these diets. So it's obvious you can't really go without the fruits and vegetables and actually be healthy. So that's an important thing to pay attention to. If you're somewhere in the middle, again, the less meat, animal product stuff that you eat, the more fruits and vegetables, the healthier you are. They've shown this more times than needed. And, if you want to know more about this kind of stuff, you can look at, there's a documentary, and there's also lots of information about it. It's called The Blue Zones. Now, I'm not 100% for this, because they talk about communities where people live into their 100s. Now, would they live even better if they cut out the alcohol and the animal products? Guaranteed. Guaranteed. But at least the way that they've constructed things, it's a lot less alcohol, it's a lot less, if even no processed foods, and they predominantly eat fruits and vegetables. Again, it depends on the community. There's all different blue zones all over the world. So some of them might eat fish, some of them might eat meat, whatever, but predominantly they eat fruits and vegetables. And that's why they live so long. They also do, sort of regular exercise, and they have a community where they all help each other. There's all these types of things that have been put together and shown to increase longer, healthy life. And that's one thing to look at. There's many others. Brian Johnson, again, he might be a bit extreme for some people, but I think his research is really, really good, because he's a walking embodiment of what you can do to extend your life in a healthy way, right? Now, obviously, this isn't completely possible for the everyday person from a money point of view, because he's putting a lot of money into this. He's getting money back, but still. But I think the way he's living like a literal research project, like a lab rat, basically. But he's signed up for himself. And, it's really interesting what he's finding out. He's got some documentaries, I think he's got one, sorry, on Netflix. And again, you can look at his, he calls it Blueprint. It's his diet online. He's got a website. There's all kinds of information there. There's all different types of plant-based doctors. I might do a video on them. There's some that are really, really good. But all of this information is available. You live longer the more fruits and vegetables and whole plant material foods you eat, right? The less medication, drugs, alcohol, whatever that you partake in, the less junk food, processed foods that you partake in, the longer you live. And not just, like your grandma who smoked 10 packs a day but somehow lived into her 80s and then now she's got emphysema. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about people who actually live a long, healthy life and don't have all these diseases. And when they die because they're just really, really old, right? Not because they're sick. They're just old, right? Again, I've heard people say things about this, which I find funny, but they'll say things like, I want to live a hard, fast, short life. I don't want to live a long life. And it's like, yeah, but what if you lived a long life and it was happy, healthy, you got to do all the things you wanted to do, and you felt good? Why wouldn't you want that? And you got to stop to think. Again, I've talked about addiction before, and I can always talk more about it. I've kicked a lot of addictions myself. I think people think that the word addiction is always bad. Again, if it's self-destructive addictions, then yes, it is. If it's self-protective, then it's just patterns, isn't it? But it's still addiction. If you stick to something, but it's good for you. Right? It's a good thing. If you stick to something that's bad for you, it's bad for you. That's pretty much how it works. But anyway, I'll go into more of that in another video. I just wanted to touch on that, just to sort of get something for you guys to chew over.